what's this about, you may ask? But there's been a lot of conversations very recently around United Ireland, around the border poll. And the Yes for Unity project has asked me to chair this meeting. This is a Zoom meeting at a local level around the district of Strabane. And it's very much around trying to get the input of local people just to garner what their hopes are, what their fears are, and maybe what their aspirations are. For maybe the last 40, 50 years, there's been a recent conflict here in Ireland. And people would have said that some people took sides. They were on the Republican side, Loyalist side, British side, Irish side, whatever. And people got confused around what the conflict was about. And there was never, and my humble experience, there was never any conversation around what a United Ireland would look like. And this is maybe a first. And Yes for Unity is looking to take us across not only the north, but the entire island of Ireland, and get conversations going around what people would like to see in a United Ireland, if they would like to see a United Ireland. But as we're getting to the big conversation in political circles is around a border poll. Do we want a border poll? Do we need a border poll? Will we ever get a border poll? And that, as I would say, is very much to the fore. When we talk about a border poll, we need to have conversations well before the onset of a border poll, before the date is struck for a border poll, around all the major complexities in the United Ireland. They are both internal complexities and external complexities. And what are they? And what are the topics for discussion? The internal ones is very much around, we have Stormont government in the 6 counties. There's a 26 county government. We have the clashes, if you want to call it that, between nationalism and unionism. We have the clashes between republicanism and loyalism. We also have many clashes internally within republicanism around ideology. And that has been very much a dividing forces. And we also have our don't knows that needs to be talked about. There needs to be dialogue and there needs to be engagement on. We also have external complexities. We have the British government. We have seen very recently a strong force around English nationalism. We have the European Union, Brexit. We have the American influence. We also have very recent campaigns around Scottish independence, Welsh independence. So these are many subjects and topics that need real debate before we get their border poll. We've had some discussions recently, and people are talking about what transition would look like if we got to a successful border poll. Would there be conversation coming from Europe? Would there be conversation coming from London? We would need to talk about how much that would be and how long that transition would take. There are many questions that people will ask around our health service. Will we pay? Will we have to pay at the point of entry? There is many a conversation around our education system and what that would look like. Our welfare system. Will I lose welfare benefits, such as DLA, PIP, for example? There are many fears that people have. Issues around social housing, private housing, access to housing. And there are many issues around cultural issues. So this conversation, this debate, has got many, many complexities that no one is sitting with a holy grail with all the answers. But what we must have is dialogue so that people can have their input into how we take this forward. So that is the conversation that we're wishing to have today. Now, there'll be some house rules, and Joe and the Yes for Unity there will try his best to chair this, and he will be able to mute people if they get rowdy and don't come around with the rules and try and maybe disrupt us and all the rest. Because we know there's people that may be against this conversation and against this dialogue, but we'll see how we go, and we'll just play it by ear. This is probably the first attempt that Yes for Unity has had at this approach. I think it's probably one of the first approaches, and for many reasons. One, we've got COVID and what goes with COVID. But two, we want people to feel that they can have their input, that they can do it anonymously, they can switch off their video, and that they have the empowerment to do with their views and that are taken on board. So with that said, I'll hand over to Joe and take it from there.
Yep. Thanks, Gag. So yeah, just a couple of housekeeping rules for everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone for coming on here today. And I'm sure there's a few participants on now, and it's growing all the time. So if needs be, depending on how the conversation is going, I might have to then maybe interrupt and just read out the rules again, if it's dependent. But anyway, so welcome everyone, and thanks a lot, and thanks for Gagzar for the introduction. So just a couple of housekeeping. As you're aware, this is a public platform, so it's streaming live across various social media and on this. So you have the right to, if you don't want to put your video on, don't put your video on. But we would like you to, because this is about yourselves. Irish Unity is about all of us. So this is just simply an open, frank discussion.
Yo, what's so ready, yo, homie? Fucking on East Side gang, homie. East Side ballin', homie. Fuck that shit, homie.
As you can see, so there's one removed. So we'll just keep an eye on it.
Am I in the right class? Am I in the right class?
Right.
Am I in the right class?
Right. We'll just see how that goes. So there's a chat box there if you want to speak. And then you just to make sure you mute yourself and unmute yourself. And
Folks, or that, Joe. Folks, look, this is an open platform. The link is very much made public, and these will be teething problems as we will face as we move forward on this type of platform. We will try our best to put people off that are coming in just with a negative reason to come on this and just for a sole purpose of disruption, i.e. not letting people have dialogue. So, Joe, you try your best to keep a...
Hello.
Yeah, 2 seconds. I'll just remove something. Yeah, so that's that. So just keep it respectful, and we'll keep it flowing.
Joe, there's
as
a few on there, Joe,
and,
that's...
yeah.
Not in touch here.
Oh, no, I've removed a few there as it is, so... all right. There's a few removed there anyway. So, Gag, let's see. Saf, I'll stick it on to you then.
Hey, thanks for letting me in, Joe. Lot of teething problems there, but looks it. Aye. So here, just the broad conversation on really what do we need to create and what needs to be done here and the now in this political climate. Obviously, like we've looked at different movements across the continent and Catalonia and the Basque and the Scottish independence movement and things. So we've went over, we discussed strategy with them and so what we see that needs to be done here is like a similar type of grassroots engagement where ordinary working class people need to be asked, you know, the simple question, what do you want society to look like? What do you want do you see happening in the future? We need to create that grassroots debate. We need to engage we people and ask them the simple question. Like it's even asking people the simple question of what do you want your society to look like? It's a revolutionary act in itself. You know, like people never been asked these questions before. People just are kowtowed to the status quo, and generally speaking, everybody just kind of tips along. So we have an opportunity with Irish Unity, with the no change that's going to happen. They begin a conversation about here. If there's going to be a new and united Ireland, let's have constitutional protections, and in that united Ireland, constitutional protections on things like the right to a home, the right to have a health service that's free at the point of demand, and a health service that works, the right to secular education for your children, like basic fundamental working class demands. Now, if we don't start this conversation about those issues, nobody else will, because like we're having a grassroots conversation and debate here about Irish unity. But believe you me, like, you know, there's people, very powerful people, very wealthy people, who are also having a debate about what, and it's not open and transparent like this. You know, they're having a debate and a discussion about what they want a united Ireland to look like. They protect their own interests. Like they want to see the merging of two, so to say, corrupt capitalist entities, and they won. You know that type of united Ireland is not in the interest of the people, and it's certainly nothing that we would support. So we're kind of, from my own experience over the last few years, having a look around the Irish unity community and the Irish unity movement, you know, it's a lot weaker than what you would think. We're nearly kind of starting from scratch here. Do you know what I mean? In relation to having a non-party political grassroots campaign that transcends party political affiliations and things like that. So there's a lot of work needs done, and hopefully, like, we engagements like us here, we conversations can begin that type of work. Joe, thanks for letting me in.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in there? Just indicate in the chat box or wave your hand. Joe, bring you in.
Yeah, just so you're aware, I've opened up a waiting room now, so anyone coming in I have to allow them in. So that should stop a lot of people coming on.
It seems to be a big attraction internationally, Joe. But I just come back to some of the stuff that Michael was talking about there. Like, we have seen a recent referendum in Scotland, and 2014, I think it was, and the lead up to that, there was a very detailed analysis and document done. I think it was something around 800 pages, I think it was. But you see, in order to get that, and particularly like when we're looking at a United Ireland, we don't have too many, if you want to call them friendlies, that would look to resource that. So there has to be a level playing field. So, and there's no doubt that the British government will take a side, and the side that they'll take will be on the side of the union. So we will. So we.
Put the chopper on and nigga turn to a sprinter.
So we will need to look and get access to resources.
What is happening?
Exactly what is happening. Joe, whoever's doing the put out stuff needs to be a bit sharper.
No, they're out now. They're out.
So on the side of Irish Unity, it needs to get resources in order to level the playing field, that people can have an understanding, and people can have, and if it is a border poll, that people can have a balanced and fair position to be in order to make their vote, not just a one-sided document that'll come from the British government. So there's a long way to go before we get to actually getting to marking an X on a paper. Anyone want to come in?
I'll bring in Michael.
Unmute yourself, you're muted.
Guys, I was saying, like, when we were in Catalonia, we're over as political observers. The Catalan independence referendum. Yourself and myself were there. We were inside the polling stations whenever the vote was happening. You know, like we certainly are a right bit away from kind of creating that type of mirror movement that engages everybody around the issue of national self-determination. But like, it has to start somewhere. You know, conversations have to begin. You know, like it always begins at a small level, and whenever you're looking at the Catalan movement that created that referendum, you've seen that it started in the rural areas. You know, like people just getting together like this, having small conversations about the need for real change, about the need for like a new vision and for hope and an end to kind of the neoliberal kind of thinking that went on in relation to like the cycle of recessions that capitalism creates. That like 2008 to now, we're going to go deep on another huge recession. You know, how do you end that? You know, how do you end the suffering and the poverty and things that comes along with that? Like we have an opportunity here in Ireland with the Irish Unity debate, with the transitional process that'll happen. They have them discussions and they ask people what they want. What do you want your society to look like? And answer some of the questions.
Yeah, thanks for that. One thing about like to open to the room, I think it's because this is Strabane and Lifford, is you know, exactly for this open to everybody. How would Irish Unity affect you, you know, as a local community, and also, you know, some specifics potentially of what you would like, you know, what would you like to see within the local community with regards to the Irish Unity? You know, where would you like it to proceed from where it is now? I mean, do you think it, you know, is it based on sort of an Irish Unity campaign, such as the March for Unity was there? You know, do you want it to be based around them sort of projects, or more specifically, you know, with do you think it's safe as it is within the hands of political parties? You know, and that's open to the room, like that question. And I'm in the middle of here just removing people who are trying to get into the waiting room. So that's open to anybody. Brandon McGreen just asked, is there a question and answer session? This isn't us talking to an extent. This is open now, so if you have any questions, please ask them now. Like, you know, I'll unmute. Hi,
Anyone want to
Brendan.
come in?
Brendan, he says a question and answer session. I've asked him to unmute there. He's still muted. I think he's wanting to come in. Let's see if I can get him on here. Okay. Anyone? No, that's fine. Anyone else have anything to add to this, or? Again, apologies for the disruptions we had there, but I mean, it should be under control now. We've got a waiting room underway, so anyone's coming in now will have to be admitted. So that should stop any disruptions if you do want to talk.
Right, seems to be a background noise. No, folks, the only way this is work is through engagement. We didn't set this up as to be a top table panel and just a one-sided views. This was more around a community engagement. It's around more allowing people to talk amongst themselves. So if people are not engaging, then it'll probably dry up very quick. So that's where we're going to find ourselves. But it's probably, in a sense, that, go back to what I said earlier, it's a conversation. Many people roared and shouted from the rooftops about wanting a United Ireland, but never really had the conversation of what a United Ireland would look like. And it is probably not an easy conversation to have, because anytime I've had a conversation, people will talk about the Free State, and they go, I don't want to be a part of the Free State, because they get that sense of everything that's wrong in the 26 counties. They don't want to be a part of it, whether they're loyalist or Republican. So it's a very hard conversation to have, and that's probably, you know, the crutch of it, that people are not used to having the conversation. They're used to, maybe, if you want to call it, the rhetoric. But once we burrow deep down, we need to have a conversation about what it is we want, what it will look like, and how will we get it. Because it won't be an easy road, but we need to have the conversation. Michael, you looking in there?
Is that me, Adam?
Yes.
Yeah, like, see there, be careful, because like I could talk all day here, do you know what I mean? So nobody else is yeah, I know. But yeah, like, see, we did do some community engagement that was door to door before the pandemic, right? Now we knocked doors around Belfast and Strabane and things, and Derry City and all, and just like asked people, you know, a simple question: what's your hopes and what's your fears and things, right? Around the issue of Irish unity. Man, there's real fears within our community, within our own community, about what Irish unity is going to look like. What you were saying there now, Paul, about what the healthcare system is going to look like. Is there going to be secular education? Is there going to be like jobs, living wages? Like, you know, all this thing is like all potential issues that would scare people away, because the British government and Ulster Unionism have one weapon that they can use against us, and that weapon is called Project Fear. And we're seeing the outworkings of Project Fear at the minute with the Ratlins and Ulster loyalism and the DUP pulling people away from their work and at the ports and things. You know, beyond their no illusion, folks, Project Fear has a real like possibility of scuppering Irish unity, because they want to scare people back into their houses. They want to make people afraid of change. The Ulster Unionism, the British government, like, no, beyond their no illusion, there's some really, really, really powerful forces aligned up against us here, and this kind of contemporary struggle. Like, so what we need to be doing is using people power. You know, we need to win the debate within our own communities. We need to give people hope, and we need to give people a wee bit of a vision of a future that's for the many, like, and not the few. You know, the paraphrase like a slogan that was used there and by Jeremy Corbyn and things. But it's a real thing. You know, like, well, what we need to see is a proper. There needs to be a visible demand for Irish unity before it's going to be created. You know what I mean? And we can have all the theoretical discussions and debates about the Air New document, or the First Dáil, or the Socialist Republic, or all these things that exist in kind of the language of Irish Republicans, but it really means nothing if we don't win.
I've got someone there coming in for I'll say Nathan. Nathan, I'll just ask you on mute there, and I'll put, if you want to speak, and maybe if you want to put your video on, and I'll spotlight you.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. I'm okay to go ahead there now.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll replace you. There you go.
Yeah, just probably just more so a point of clarity there, Michael, in relation to Yes for Unity. Now, I have read the documents, and they're very clear and very easy to read. Like, and like yourself, I mean, I grew up in Derry, albeit the East Bank, which is, you know, a border town, border community. And there are real fears, like you hear the stories there regarding, you know, they have to pay there to get their bins taken out. They have to pay for their health care. They have to pay to get their waste removed and things like that. And that is a real fear, even in a community where, you know, you would routinely drive over the border just to get your diesel. There's still a lot of misconceptions about what it is that people face in the south of Ireland, and a lot of people simply believe then in the north that the likes of the NHS, free healthcare, the education, and other things that they're getting, and that's already pathetic. It's already measly, particularly in communities like West Belfast and a lot of rural communities in Mid Ulster and the like. It is already terrible, and people are afraid then that it'll only get worse. In terms of Yes for Unity's goal to address that, I mean, you can do it with broad strokes. We all know well that we can have free healthcare in this country. We can have free education. We can have a house for everybody. We already have enough homes for everybody. We already have enough to provide education for everybody, to ensure that nobody goes hungry. We can ensure all that. We have the resources. We just have a system that prevents us from having that. And the question, I suppose, then, in terms of Yes for Unity, does Yes for Unity aim to address that on a policy level, or is this simply us saying, Bradley, well, you know, we can overcome those issues, but we can't do it while partition exists, and we need to resolve that? So it's a question for yourself there, Michael, or perhaps Gags even.
You want to jump on, Gags, or I can answer that?
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Like, see, essentially, Nathan, what we're talking about is building a mass movement of people, right? Now, like, Irish unity is like a united Ireland is not no. I'm not going home. Once we get if we want a border poll tomorrow morning, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to sit in the house. Like, what our end goal is making society work for, like, ordinary people, making it work in their interests, right? So what Yes for Unity kind of was started out about was, like, conversations within Irish republicanism. Going back, you know, myself, like, you know, like left Sinn Féin in 1998. I had my own journey through kind of republicanism and whatever, and talking to like-minded people and whatever. And in 2016, you know, we all seen all the false dawns and we all seen all the defeats and all the heads were down, you know, but there was hope there too, you know, because we understand what oppression is. We understand that, like, that, you know, people's daily struggles. You know, there's nobody really out there like fighting their corner. So what we says, like, what we can use Yes for Unity to do is build up momentum towards Irish unity. Of course, yes, do that all day long, but also that the mass movement that we create, the when a border poll, it's not going away after a border poll. You know, like you know, once we reach that critical mass and reach that tipping point and won that referendum for Irish unity, that you use that same mass movement against the current cabal and clique of wealthy, powerful people that took control in the 26 counties in 1922 and passed that power and control down throughout their families and cliques. You know, so like we're not, you know, once we achieve Irish unity, we're not going to be sitting in the house. We're talking about pure, actual, total revolution. Do you know? I hope that answers your question, Nathan.
Sorry, I was muted there, Michael. No, that's 100%. Thanks for that. And just another question then regarding Catalonia, which Joe mentioned at the beginning, that some of the people behind YFU were there in Catalonia with the architects of the Catalonian independence movement. What I'm wondering is where did they find themselves in similar circumstances where they were having to address the living issues to get people on board also, or did they find that they were able to push forward kind of solely on a need for independence basis, or was it drawn on broader economic and societal issues? How did they find they gained momentum within communities?
Well, here, like,
I think, Nathan, there was a lot of it. From what I've seen, it was very much a grassroots. It was from the school teacher, the small shop owner, the lone parent. It was very much a broad front, and that broad front was across the whole spectrum of the economic, social, and cultural aspects, and that's what brought people out, particularly like under one banner. You know, so it wasn't solely on a constitutional issue. It was very much across the board.
100%. That answers that too. Thanks, Kegs. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Right. There's a question there, and there's a couple of questions there, and it's open to everyone. And I think it's already been touched on, but there's one there. I think we all understand that this needs to happen from the ground up and start in the communities. But there seems to be something that prevents people from mobilizing. How can we get that message out that we can't rely on political parties to deliver this for us? And for a lot of people, they live hand to mouth and day to day. What actions can we get ordinary people to take to drive this forward? Because survival day to day is working class people's main priority at the minute. I mean, I would just touch on that as well to say that, you know, I think with Yes for Unity, our objective has been and has always been to ensure that working class needs and aspirations, socioeconomic desires are at least at the post-partition table, that they're heard. You know, I don't think any person really would want, any person or working class person would want the United Ireland that if their needs aren't improved or met the post-unity. So I think that's a very good comment. You know, that this needs to be from the ground up. So how do we together, as not only as Irish Unity community, but as a community, because this is what it's about, how do we drive people forward to become proactively involved in the Irish Unity campaign? And that's open to everyone, you know, people here who potentially aren't active Irish Unity activists but want to be. You know, what would make you be involved in the Irish Unity campaign proactively?
Joe, just if I come on there, Joe, to see And again, this initiative here is an idea come up from Yes for Unity, and particularly from young people, which is good to see. And it's an initiative that's trying to break that barrier that the question's asking. You see, individualism, it is the greatest friend of neoliberalism. For the Tories rolling out their right-wing policies, that's what they rely on. Individualism. Let people be isolated. Let people think that they're climbing a greasy pole, and at any stage, if they fall foul, they will slide down that greasy pole, and that's how they succeed, and that's how they divide communities, and that's how they pit neighbour against neighbour, and that's what they would do. Is if they had their way, they would build high hedges between every house so that no one knows what's going on next door. And we have seen it here in the north, where slowly but slowly they introduce massive austerity measures, cuts, where people were losing their benefits all over the place, but they never knew their next door neighbour was losing it, and their next door neighbour was losing it, and their next door neighbour was losing it. But if there had been a collective approach, then I think we may have been more successful in trying to address it and trying to block it. So it's initiatives like this, and I know this is a first, and it's a bit of a hairy start, but that's where you need to start. There's been many revolutions started and 3 or 4 sitting around a table, and that's where we need to go. But we need to have people in, and we need to have people's input in, and it has to be from a people's position, not from an individual position. Anything else coming in?
No. There was another question there, which was good. Let me just get it up. Some of these are coming actually from Facebook Messenger because we're live streaming. So a lot of people, just because of the issues that we had there originally at the start, it was a lot of people aren't getting in. So we had a good question there, and I'm sure this actually affects a lot of people in Strabane. But they're saying about if a border poll does come about, or when it comes about, when it comes down to who can vote. Now we all know that the vote that's going to lie with the Secretary of State, unfortunately. But there's a growing movement at the minute with regards to allowing under 16s to vote. That's also happened in Scotland, and there's also questions about should people who are living abroad be allowed to vote. And we all know how the Strabane, Derry area, Lifford has been affected for generations with regards to migration, due to socio-economic reasons. So does anyone want to come in on that? And it's going into the specifics more so of the Irish Unity debate and conversations, but what's people's thoughts on who should be able to vote? Should it be allowed to be under 18s to 16-year-olds up? And what about people who are living abroad?
Okay, I'll just come in on maybe just the hard stuff and where we find ourselves. And when we talk about a border poll, it has been divisive, particularly among Republicanism, because this border poll, it was built into the Good Friday Agreement, and it was very much talked about the people of the North and the people of the North deciding, but that will have to change. It'll have to become some sort of all-Ireland vote. But the downside and the reality is at the behest of a Secretary of State to call a border poll if and when they would decide that there's likelihood of the outcome being successful, and how they could come to that conclusion is up to themselves. So that's an issue. The second issue is if there's a successful outcome, then that outcome gets transferred to London, the House of Parliament, for their endorsement or not. And should they endorse it, then there's another element where it goes to the House of Lords and whether they would endorse it or not. So there's a lot of precursors built into this that a lot of people that live on this island would ask the question, why should they have that decision-making power when it's about the people of Ireland that would decide on who would vote and who wouldn't vote, who would be eligible and who wouldn't, and about the outcome, whether it would be their decision or not. So that would be very much an issue that needs to be challenged. And I think that when we hear about the conversation that's going on in the political circles around a border poll and a United Ireland, I think there's a lot more political leaders need to get behind this. Irish political leaders need to get behind this. Now, we have a lot of political parties that claim to be Republican, but when it comes to coming to stand up their plate, they're found wanting, to say the least. I've heard some stuff coming from the SDLP that are now talking about a 75% plus one. And they talk about democracy. And they talk about when there was a conflict on here, and they talked about the bogeymen, and they were saying that the bogeymen need to put away their guns in order to get democracy, and democracy would sort it out. And it was 50 plus one then. And now shifting the goalposts to 75% plus one. It's not going to work. That's not going to happen. And when it comes to the demographics of a 50 plus one, that's what democracy is. And the political parties shouldn't be allowed to rewrite democracy to suit their own sense of democracy. Anywhere we talk about a democracy, it's 50% plus one. And that's where we need to be getting at. And that pressure that's coming and it's growing will decide who can vote and where they're at and what the question is going to be and what it's going to look like afterwards. That's what needs to happen.
Just,
I
know Michael put his hand up there. Just to keep that conversation going, we're getting quite a lot of engagement here on Facebook, on the messengers, and just on that, there's a couple of comments here which have came in which are interesting. Just as you touched on there, Gags, people are saying that, you know, the Irish government need to do more, as do the Stormont government. And there was a comment there about you know, the last agreement in Stormont, for example, which one it was, there was no mention at all within the whole document of Irish unity. So that was a comment raised. Another one is, would suppose this could be targeted at any group who are involved in Irish unity, but I know this is similar to what they're doing in Scotland at the minute in Wales. Is there an opportunity for a sort of yes campaign, you know, which maybe could even, this comes from online, could they run as candidates? Could you know, a yes campaign? This is similar to what they're doing in Scotland at the minute. Would that be a way to incorporate the communities into this campaign, as we do see across the water? I mean, Michael, do you want to come in on that, or I'll bring you in?
I go ahead, Joe. Just here, like, I'll just kind of go back to the under 16s thing as well, because see, young people, man, like people don't have enough confidence in young people. Like, see, real change, like it needs to come from the vision of young people. Like, young people know what's going on. You know, like, people don't give them enough credit. Like, you know, and here we're deep into the middle of a pandemic, man. Hey, they're not a community centre open for them. Do you know what I mean? Hey, like, and people are far too quick to jump on social media and fell set the wains. Do you know, the teenagers? But hey, like, no, there's nearly a youth stone from them. You know what I mean? But here, just on the triple lock, right? And about a border poll things, you know, like, you would get your head chopped off, you know, and quicker by some Republicans when you're talking about a border poll and you're talking about that process and the triple lock than you would by loyalists and the issue. Like, people are, there's fundamental, like, you know, people are going, but the British Secretary of State can only call it. There has to be a visible majority for Irish unity. The unionist veto, right? Now, speaking, not speaking on behalf of Yes for Unity, I'm only speaking on this issue on my own personal view. I don't see them as locks. I just see them as hurdles that we have to overcome. Like see, once you create the visible demand for Irish unity, once you get people motivated, there's an unstoppable momentum that you'll create that'll sweep all that aside. Do you know what I mean? Like, people view all those things as barriers and blocks and what, man, I don't see it like that. I just see that there are problems that we have to maneuver around, and there's real solutions to it. Do you know what I mean? But that's me.
I'll just let me see. Just on the 16-year-olds, got a comment in there. We're actually getting a lot of engagement here online on Facebook and Twitter with questions and stuff. I'm trying to message them to try and get them on. But there was a comment there, and it's a very, very good comment. 16-year-olds should be allowed to vote, and it is imperative that people who have been forced to leave due to the impacts of partition should have a right to vote in any referendum on Irish unity. Now, that's a very, very good point, especially with regards to the Strabane and Lifford area. There's an answer on that. I'm trying to get a few people in here on Facebook who are commenting. I'm sure there's just difficulties getting on because we're being pretty strict on who can get in after the waiting room. But with regards to the fifth, there's a comment: a 51-49 split would be disastrous for building a post-poll consensus. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that or want to come in on that? I mean, I can put the if you need the Yes for Unity position on that would be, and 50 the idea of 51-49 was good enough to create partition. It's certainly good enough to end partition. Democracy is democracy. I mean, would the Scots be told no? You have to have 60% to win your own independence. Would the Welsh be told that? It's democratically not viable to say that we're an exception to that rule because of potentially, let's say, a threat of violence. But again, partition was created through a threat of violence. Democracy was destroyed through a threat of violence. It's up to us as a community, and I know the Irish Unity community have pushed violence to the side, and we've decided this is an option to peacefully, create a united Ireland. So the answer, anyway, from Yes for Unity's point of view with that is 51-49 is good enough. It's democracy. People might not like it, but that's the way it is. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I'll come on that, Joe.
Yes.
Just around. If and when we get to a vote, the thing before vote is not to look at the disasters of what the outcome may or may not be. What the secret of this poll will be very much around, and there's many, and we talked about earlier, complexities. But when we talk about the hopes and the fears and the aspirations, and then we talk about putting together a document that will be economic and will be social and be cultural. We have also complexities around Brexit, where if we went back possibly 30, 40 years ago and talked about a border poll, you would have had many Republicans and nationalists completely opposed it. You would have had many unionists and loyalists opposed it. And you would have many at an international level opposed it. But we find ourselves in 2021, and a lot of things have changed. Particularly what's changed is in the north, there's been relatively absence of violence. There has been Brexit. And a lot of those people who may have been opposed to a United Ireland have now changed their views. And go back to what Michael was talking about earlier. there's been a lot of contradictions being exposed. So this is not about a 50+1. This is about coming together, getting dialogue, dispel the myths, dispel the fears, and then when we go to a democratic vote, we will see what the outcome is. And I would suspect that if it's done right, if the process is done right, then I believe that the percentage in favour of United Ireland will be much, much higher than a 51-49. And that's what we need to get to. We need to engage with unionism, with loyalism. We need to talk. And I've been involved in talking to loyalism. And a lot of, believe it or believe it not, a lot of loyalism is about their football team, about Northern Ireland international football team, as they see it, and will it still exist. And that, for a lot of loyalists, is the love of their life. So there needs to be, when we talk about cultural issues, we need to talk about building in securities for people that may come from a different persuasion. And I think if that's done properly, then you will see a great change in the percentage outcome.
Okay, I'll just bring in someone here. I'll bring in who has a good point. Let me just see. I'll just. Hey, Grant, do you want to come in if you unmute yourself now with your point?
I no bother. So
Brilliant.
I was writing in the chat box there. Is it me you were calling on?
Yeah.
No bother. So it was just sort of off the back of like the point around 16-year-olds being able to vote, and it was sort of a continuation of that. And I know I wrote in earlier about what actions can we give for like ordinary people and things like that. And in my sort of understanding, like I done history in school and through school, and then I went on and done just recently graduated with a degree in history and social anthropology from Queen's. And it was something I felt that through the history that I felt an attachment to and that I was passionate about continuing to learn was Irish history and working class history and the history of the trade union movement and the history of working class people in communities like mine. I'm from the head of the town in Strabane, and seeing how history still exists and impacts us day and daily in this estate, in this area, is something really, really sort of that I keep in mind whenever I am studying history. But I felt that whenever I did go to university, I went to university to study history because of the history that I learned in my community and not the history that I learned in school. And I do think that our current education system, be that secondary education, second level education, or higher and further education, aren't equipped, are deliberately trying to disenfranchise our young people and not make them partake in a system that maintains a status quo rather than actually challenging the way things are. Because we were taught, I remember writing in my personal statement to university that what interested me was risings and rebellions, and where communities and the oppressed sort of challenge the oppressor and challenge these massive systems, and that sort of kept them at the bottom of the barrel. And that was the history that I was interested in, but I felt that I was never really given the option to really explore that in school. And I think that the education system is used to disenfranchise young people. And then whenever you do go to university, and I'm not saying that there aren't problems with the university curriculums and things like that need looked at, but university is a space where you may have more freedom as a young person, or as someone who wants to grow and research and look more into an area that you're passionate about. And for me, that was working class and Irish history. But how many financial, structural and societal barriers do we have to face in accessing higher education to get to that? So the space where at the secondary level, whenever you're going through your exams, you're taught this is what you have to learn to pass your exams. Don't be biased. Don't use the phrase the 6 counties. You have to call it Northern Ireland and things like that. But I still said 6 counties and I still came out with an A. But no, it's that sort of like an oppression or a suppression of an Irish and Republican identity and the history that I was taught in school. And you're not actually encouraged to take part or look at how history has impacted things around you. But what things that I have struggled with, things that I did struggle with during my time at university, was the fact that I was 18 years old and I had to move away from home for the first time to access it. I had to pay to move into halls. I was paying around £120 a week. And then whenever you leave halls, you're in substandard housing that your landlord's not answering your emails whenever your boilers broke for a few weeks. And you're also and while those at the top of the university I recently seen a thing where the Vice Chancellor of Queen's has his TV license paid for, but students have to take out hardship loans and everything like that. And then it's even more difficult if you are an older student or a mature student, or if you're a student parent, if you have caring responsibilities where you can't just up stakes your life and move 90 miles away. And even accessing that 90 miles away isn't an option for people, and they have to go across the water. And so the main place where you have a place where you are considered to have freedom in your education is, so we as working class people, we face so many barriers in accessing that. And whenever the education we have available to us is set up to deliberately sort of hinder you as sort of a citizen or a person that wants to challenge the status quo, you're not really encouraged or taught how to do that. Whenever we have so much so much of what I learned about community organising was about what I learned and being from Strabane and knowing my local history, and I'm really lucky that I had as well like a family that whenever I had learned, they really wanted me to learn about women in these movements and how women upheld these communities. But that's something that was so not part of what I was learning in school. And whenever any sign of my Irish or Republican identity came through in my essays and things, I was marked down or I was told off. And I think that that's a really, I think that that's something to be really sort of aware of, and that I think that the education system is there to, at the minute, sort of may disenfranchise people and young people. Sorry that I took too long there.
All right, Grant, I'll come in there, Joe. Just and give a bit of maybe a background to other people that are looking at me, and fully concur there with the previous speaker. Look, to see the system or education system and how we fall under it is, and you can call it whatever you want. You can call it the 11+, call it the transfer test. There's many a name for it, but it still exists, and that system is designed to split our society. And it does it in the form of 25% of our children go to grammar stream and 75% go to a lower stream of education. And when you look at that system, and the difficulty we have is we all play in it. But when you look at it and you analyse it, is if you come from a working class background, the likelihood is you're traveling to school. The likelihood is you're walking. Distance. There's no bearing. The likelihood is no one asked, have you been fed? Have you had breakfast? Are you hungry? No one asked. No one asked, have you got appropriate clothes for the weather? No one asked. But you go into a classroom and you go into the same classroom as someone who may come from a wealthy background, who is well fed, who's come from a heated home, who's been probably dropped off of school, and they may be coming from piano lessons and going to school early. They may be coached and have facilities to be coached around a test. So that the balance or imbalance is very much skewed to the wealthy before you put pen to paper in an exam. But every parent will go, I want my child to have an education, and we compete within a system that is very much unfair. And that's what it does. And what comes out the other end, in most cases, now, and Grania might be the exception of someone the likes of coming out of the head of town and getting the third level education, because you've had to break through all those barriers, all those challenges that society is putting in front of you to block you getting a third level education. From the school that you were in, from the landlord who says that he's charging you a very expensive rent, where you look and the only sources you have is your parents, and can your parents afford it? That's the difficulties that we have in our system if you come from a working class background. So it needs radically overhauled, completely, from the bottom to the top, to allow a level playing field for our kids in the education system. And that's what needs to happen. Put it out the floor.
Does anyone want to come in just on that, and to maybe try and redirect it specifically back to the Irish unity, the conversation of what would an All Ireland education system potentially look like? Does anyone want to come in on that?
Here, is that me on?
Yes.
Come here. Like, see what I would say is religion, it needs to come out completely of education. There needs to be a secular system. Like, you can't have the religious establishments in control of the Wayne's education, because there's an indoctrination process that goes on there, like we your Holy Communion and we your confirmation and things within the CCMS type schools. It's really unfair. Like, the Waynes are took in, they kneel down and bow down and like it's a bit scary. Like, you shouldn't be like teaching children the concepts of hell and all that. But like, just going back to the points that Green were making there, like Green, what Paul said, it's an exception to the rule, but and it is true, from where Green's from and the head of the town, she's a success story, and I very much because her family and the baggage she got and whatever else, and everybody's really proud of her, and she smashed up through them glass ceilings. But like, how to create an education system that gives everybody that opportunity, man, that's why Yes for Unity exists. That's why we're saying, hey, we need to have hope and vision. We need to start talking about these concepts here, and whenever Irish Unity comes, it needs to be radical change across the board. And this process, this transition into some type of 32 county socio-economic framework, it's a huge opportunity for everybody they make their stake and let's say, hey, we're better than this. Do you know what I mean? Let's create a society for everybody. You know, like the 1916 proclamation of the Irish Republic says, you know, cherish all the children of the nation equally. Hey, let's do it.
Thanks, Michael. There was something coming in here again on Facebook. There's people looking at, as I say, coming on, but there's, as you know, there's a bit of an issue here. So there was a question raised on Facebook. The panel criticised the South for health and education. It's a different system. Wages are higher and welfare is higher. People in the South see the North as state aided in relation to the percentage in the public sector compared to the private sector. Much more business savvy in the South. Both jurisdictions have their problems. Thank you for this meeting. But the person who commented still is still in favour of United Ireland. I mean, I could start on that one with regards to the yes for unity. It's undoubtedly that the South is, let's call it, business savvy. But the South also has, you know, I personally, we all have our opinions. I don't measure how a country is doing socio-economically on its business savvy, on its GDP, on its wealth. I measure a country mostly on its homeless rates, and the South has a massive homeless issue. So I would say that you know, while there might be business savvy, you know, the South with a slow corporation tax, and it's basically a tax haven for big business. Big business contribute very, very little to the economy in the South, except for a couple of high level employee wages. The rest of their profits that is made is pumped out of the country. So I mean, I would say with the question we could come from that is, you know, how would a United Ireland compete when you have such people, and I'm sure, let's say they have a lot of political clout, would be lobbying, you know, to make sure that a post-partition Ireland will make sure that the big business can still survive in the United Ireland. And when I say big business can survive, it means low taxes, and it means very little government interference, and that any profits that they make can be, let's say, pumped out. I'm not sure. Does Nathan? Do you want to come in on that? I know you like to talk about the business side of things. Would you be okay to come in on that?
He might be away. Is he?
He's still there.
Sorry,
Nathan?
Joe. Yeah. Sorry, Joe. Yeah, you're completely correct on what you're saying there. With regard to the economy of the 26 counties. Just bear with me. Yeah, you're completely correct there in regards to what you're saying. The economy is based wholly on the distortion of statistics. It's something that some economists have referred to as leprechaun economics, where they have distorted the country's economic performance to such a degree that they needed to actually find new ways of measuring it so it was adequately reflected in the statistics. And that, as you said, was to do with Ireland basically becoming a tax haven involving multinational corporations, large international corporations, headquartering their businesses in Ireland, and then only paying tax through where they were headquartered, and Ireland dropping the tax rate to such an extent that they all wanted to put their headquarters here. That meant that their outgoings and how healthy they were basically reflected in Ireland's economic statistics. But as we know, during this time, countless people in Ireland were living in poverty, living on the streets, living on the breadline. And with that in mind, then we can see firsthand as people in working class communities, both rural and urban, that whatever statistics were saying that Ireland's economy was performing great certainly weren't being reflected on the ground. And so economically, in terms of what we'll need to do in a United Ireland is do what it is that you referred to there. It's take the economy away from being something abstract and academic and make it something based in the well-being of the people. Now, people will have varying views on how that can be achieved. Some people would look to the Nordic model, for example, and think that will be a way to kind of bring about some degree of parity of esteem in Ireland. Others will look further to the left than that, and that includes myself. So with regards to the likes of the Nordic model and various other things, including the kind of Labour policy in England, or their intended policy, had Jeremy Corbyn been elected, that to me, the Nordic model and the likes of other models which have been used throughout Europe and throughout the world, have not gone far enough. They've simply taken the rough edges of capitalism and made it more presentable. The issue there is that it's always reversible, and we've seen that in terms of the Nordic model. The wealthy, moneyed classes don't sit and allow this to happen. They're in a constant state of preparing to claw back and to fight back, and they will do that once the opportunity presents itself. And in a lot of cases, that can be things like the COVID pandemic, where people have been waiting for something which Naomi Klein called the shock doctrine. They wait for disasters and then they move on. They finance repair and they live off the back of it then for a long time to come at the expense of working people. What we need to be doing economically, in my opinion, is moving toward, and this branches under our ideology, also in terms of socialism versus kind of middle of the road nationalism. We're moving toward a classless society. There's no point in talking about half measures if we're talking about a revolutionary scenario here in which there is going to be Irish unity, and that presents itself with broad economic and social opportunities. What we're actually seeing is the relieving of one of the longest standing, if not the longest standing, imperial presences in what should be a sovereign nation in history. And so with that in mind, we need to be looking through at making major economic strides and making sure that whatever happens, it comes in the interest of the people of Ireland as a whole, and namely the working class people, the people in poverty who have been struggling. So what we want to aim for is to get away from the exploitation and oppression which characterizes the current system, and to have a scenario in which we're going to see everyone living happily free from exploitation and oppression, at least on a systemic level. And in that regard, that means aiming for a classless society. How we go about doing that, of course, there are various economic and political means. Not that you can totally kind of detach the two; they're inextricably intertwined. But economically speaking, in any case, we need to be looking to make maneuvers there, make policy to invoke various methods to ensure that the economy is guided toward the interests of the people. And naturally, we know what that reflects on the ground. That reflects, of course, free education, free healthcare. It reflects a home for everyone, nobody going hungry. It reflects nobody having to live in circumstances where they're basically struggling for shelter or for a roof over their heads. And how we do that is naturally going to have precedent in terms of how other countries have been working to alleviate poverty. And we need to be looking at those mechanisms. We also need to be looking at the detailed kind of economic structure internationally. I studied economics, and what I can say is that what we've been fed in school, in the media, and in other arenas in regards to economics is, completely sided with ensuring the retaining of the status quo, the interests of the rich, the interests of what I would call the bourgeoisie being guarded. So we need to begin also a process of examining that and moving forward. Irish unity presents us with the opportunity to ensure those things that I'm talking about. The intricacies of it mightn't be for a lot of people in terms of the kind of what you might term the academic aspects of it, looking at what policy tools are open to socialists, the people who want freedom in their respective countries. But it will mean things like ensuring that we do not have billionaires. It's totally inconceivable that you can have billionaires in a society where there's scarcity for others in working class communities. That is totally inconceivable. And ensuring also that that wealth gap begins to be diminished, so we don't have a class-based society. And other things do come under it aside from economics directly, things like education, things like healthcare, but none of that comes free in essence, because something has to be circulating to make that happen. And we need to look at what we're going to take from and who we're going to give to provide free education, free healthcare, to ensure a home for everyone. We need to be looking at where we're going to take from to ensure that happens. And in that regard, we have a class of people there that live as parasites, exploiting working people to retain their prestige. And we need to ensure that it comes at their expense. And that for me is what'll be key. In terms of Yes for Unity, like I say, pushing toward an Ireland free from partition, we need to be looking also at making sure that it's an Ireland free from systemic exploitation and oppression also. So that's just my own view on it.
Yep. Thanks for that, Nathan. So what we'll do, I mean, we'll wrap it up, but we've had there's been a lot of engagement. A lot of these questions have came from Facebook. So there's been a lot of people engaging with us online. Again, just apologies for the disruptions at the start, but as I say, this is the learning curve. We're going to be rolling this out as we go along, so we'll learn from that and we'll improve it as we go along. So I was just going to ask, does anyone else here have any more questions on this? Which they want to raise? I'm monitoring the Facebook Live as well, where we're getting a lot of questions from. So,
Joe, just is anybody that's on here on the feed here that hasn't asked a question, that has got a burning question they want to get out before we wrap it up? No? Hi, look, folks, and just following on from Nathan there, like when we look at Ireland as a small island, and when we talk about the many systems that's on it, it's unbelievable, like different economies, a small island. Do you see when we talk about the education system, I'm not sure how many systems we have, but we have more than two. When we look at in the north, there's quite a few systems that don't act in the favour of the working class whatsoever. And when we've seen like the difference in the health systems, COVID has very much brought that to the fore, where you had lockdowns in the 26 counties, the north was open, and then vice versa. And like the rise and fall of COVID cases was all and a lot based on the different actions taken by the different governments at different times. So you couldn't get a pint in Strabane in a pub, but you walked a mile and you could go into a pub in Lifford and get a pint. And then those situations reversed, where you couldn't get a pint in Lifford, you get one Strabane. So people were going where they could get the service. Shops closed, hairdressers closed, all of them closed in different jurisdictions at different times and opened at different times. And it was all over the place as a strategy to try and combat COVID. It just was beyond ridiculous. We're now in a situation where less than a mile from my home that I can be fined £100 for being found in the location of Lifford if I have what's called deemed a reasonable excuse. So it's beyond we talked about earlier, the contradictions. It's gone beyond that tipping point where people are saying we're not, in 2021, we're not going to live under all these mad contradictions of different systems. That the only way it's going to work is through a united system, wherever that system be, and it's for all the people of Ireland to decide that. And that's where we need to get to. But in conclusion to that, we're a long way to go. This is a start of a community engagement. And as you say, this technology is very much open to abuse once you go public with it. But I think that we'll really fine tune it. And the next time we might have someone just specifically on the the management of opening and closing the door as such. But we'll learn, because we've been at it a long time, 800 years, and we'll get there. So I would like to thank everybody for coming on, and particularly those people that tramped around the streets of Strabane delivering leaflets for the last fortnight. That is not easy work neither. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thanks. So I'll stop the stream now live. So thanks again, and everyone just we're rolling this out as we go along. So we're going to be hitting other areas over the next couple of months. So we'll work on it as we go along and learn from what happened here. So yeah, thanks very much everyone on behalf of Yes for Unity.